Welcome to the Killer Innovation Show, the longest continuously produced podcast in history. Each week, Phil McKinney brings you the insights and strategies to amplify your creativity and innovation skills. Here's your host, Phil McKinney.
Welcome to Killer Innovations. We are continuing our series of episodes where I was interviewing guests at the Tech Expo show in Philadelphia. So today's guest is Asaf Matatyaou. Asaf is the VP Solution and Product Management at Harmonic. We covered a wide range of topics in the interview, starting off with, obviously, the COVID conversation. We spent a fair amount of time talking about green initiatives around power that it takes to run broadband networks, as an example. We also dove into AI and what's the role of artificial intelligence in automation, and the role of big data and how big data is going to feed that automation, make better decisions. I also pushed Asaf to really think about and share how Harmonic looks at the customer as a source for innovation and how that innovation then turns itself into products that Harmonic brings to the marketplace. And then that naturally then jumped into innovation culture and talking about how they support, create, and model an innovation culture at Harmonic. And at the end, I asked Asaf to share his advice to you, the listener. What would be one piece of advice, given his career, given his success, what would be that one piece of advice that he would give to you, the listener? So you want to make sure that you listen to the end. So before we jump into this week's episode, this interview with Asaf, got that favor to ask: follow, like, and share. Follow us on social media, like this episode, give us a thumbs up, give us a rating, and then share it with others. Let others know about this. Share these great nuggets, these great lessons learned from somebody who's achieved great success in their career initiative in a topic area that I think touches literally everybody worldwide. So with that, let's jump in to this week's episode. What's up? We've been here at the show. How's the show going for you guys?
Well, it's been a great show. Lots of traffic. We're really impressed with all the people we're meeting and the innovation in the industry from where we were 3 years ago. COVID aside, the industry hasn't stopped. It's pushed forward very quickly.
It's amazing, isn't it? I mean, because we haven't been together in 3 years, with COVID being the first time, in this case, the cable broadband industry's come together. You walk the floor, the amount of new things, right? It's almost like it's you took a pause, and then all of a sudden everybody's like got the new thing that they started on 2 years ago.
It is, and thankfully we use Zoom, and we've been we're a global organization, so it's great to be in person. It's also great that technology has allowed us to push even further along with cutting edge technology, and at least for us, Zoom has enabled like this, global conversations, face-to-face conversations, and then when we meet in person, it allows us to collaborate even more. And this is a great place to meet with your colleagues that you haven't seen for a few years, and then obviously with other industry experts and see what they're doing.
Well, it was interesting. We were talking before we started recording the show about how many people we've run into where you know them, you've known them for years, you look at their badges, but they work for a different company. I mean, there was a little bit of this shuffling. We're in major transitions with broadband industry, fiber's coming on strong. The new next generation DOCSIS is coming out. Federal government here in the United States is putting out $95 billion of infrastructure funds to build out the networks into rural parts, and Canadian government's doing something similar. We've seen it in certain other countries where the governments are pushing to put the entire citizenship online. And I think COVID also kind of accelerated that from a government perspective, and how important, because people had to work from home and learn from home. And if you didn't have connectivity, you were definitely left behind in that case. But I think, there's just a lot of change going on. And I think as a result, we're seeing the number of new vendors that didn't exist in 2019 to what's on the floor here. I'm just amazed about how many brand new companies have popped up in the segment.
Yeah, it's a healthy industry, and more than that, you could see existing companies pushing in areas they didn't push 3 years ago or 4 years ago. So even within the existing companies and the new companies, they brought in that ecosystem. I think with COVID, we could always look back at that and say, what's the focus been? I could tell you in my family, everything can turn off but the internet. It is a mission critical, expected. It's a utility for all intents and purposes. And I could, at least with my wife being a teacher and my kids being in school, they expect that to be up all the time. And I think that's an expectation. And in terms of investments, absolutely, not only in the United States, but in Europe, there's green initiatives, sustainability. It really is important when you look at the combination of all those factors of how we have to continue to push the envelope.
Yeah, in the past, innovation in the broadband or wireless industries is all, and even I come from a consumer electronics, PCs, laptops, those types of things. It's always been on speed of the processor, speed of the network, right? But I think with COVID, that has expanded. We talk about it in the context of the 10G, right? So reliability is like paramount. You look through what happened in COVID in the industry here in the United States, but then also in other parts of the world, but very heavily used here in the U.S. The industry came together and then published weekly performance reports by state. So you could go look at California and see how well the network did. Did it have any outages? What was the blocking, congestion in the network, etc. And that was pretty impressive, and that the industry could even report it, but the industry had been coming together and sharing their performance data for years as part of knowing what they had to expand their capacity. But that's just one example, security becoming another. But I'll tell you, that reliability piece, that is definitely quickly jumped up to being extremely high priority. The other one is power. The issue in Europe, the cost of electricity in Europe is so much higher. And the network consumes a fair amount of energy in order to operate. So Monday, one of the major operators here in the U.S. announced that they're going to reduce the power usage within their network by 50% by 2030. That's an amazing bar to hit.
Yeah. I mean, those initiatives, those targets, and I think it's achievable. In our experience, and I hope you don't mind me sharing some numbers here, but at Harmonic, we have a virtualized solution which allows us to go from purpose-built to COTS platforms, Intel-based, and pushing power out into the field, into the existing envelope of the power that's available out in the field. We've been able to achieve some impressive savings. And if you think about how that translates into power, about 40 megawatts of power on the servers that we use in our deployments translates into just a little under $150 million of just electricity costs being saved annually on the equipment versus what was, legacy equipment. So that all those changes save space, save power, while at the same time improving those speeds and tiers of speed that everybody comes to expect. It's pretty impressive how that expectation that bar keeps on raising year over year, and absolutely reliability it seems to be probably the most important feature that nobody talks about. It's like battery life on a computer. You just want it to be there on all the time.
Sorry, you don't want to think about it.
You don't want to even think about it, but it's a key expectation. So green initiatives and saving and sustainability, especially with the rising costs of electricity, are things that are very motivating to innovate in that area.
Well, talking about the virtualization, there's been a lot of discussion here, but it's been going on for a number of years as more and more of the network elements are being virtualized. That the network is really becoming software. It's moving away from the traditional proprietary silicon, proprietary hardware stacks, etc. But that changes more than just the fact that it's now software. The people running the network, it's a different skill set. It's a different set of capabilities, right? So this is another transition that the industry's stepping into.
It's a very interesting transition because on one hand, you got to bring that familiarity operationally. There's a lot of trained people out there that we need to make sure that it's comfortable for them to use the technology that's out there. But you also want to give them the opportunity to use the latest and greatest capabilities. You mentioned statistics per state, and the more software we have, the more visibility we have into the network, the more we can leverage those metrics to get those types of pieces of information to do AI, machine learning, and have those self-healing, self-learning networks to do proactive things. That's all with software. And so you got to give the familiarity, but you got to give them the future as well. So that combination is truly important. And it's quite exciting because with software, you could continuously add more and more information that's available out there for operations, for users, and it's definitely looking into the future with software upgradability as well.
Well, that and the other piece that a lot of people are spending a lot of time thinking about, right, is how far do you push the automation, right? And the role that AI plays, right? And there's always this, you've either got the, oh my gosh, AI is the greatest thing since sliced bread was invented, to, oh my God, it's the evil empire. It's going to take over, control everything. But AI is out there already. People are already applying it. And what is the role of automation, and what you're thinking about how far that can really go from having the network literally self-manage itself in order to increase reliability?
I think it's paramount, and we're just scratching the surface. And the reason that is, first of all, we have to be comfortable with it. So anything that's automated, you first have to at least have comfort doing it manually. But then you realize that there's so much data, a human being can't deal with it. So you have a choice to make. And if you have the confidence and you have the proof that you're getting the right data and the right actions for that data, which is where this AI comes in, and you're continuously training it, then the opportunity is quite fantastic in terms of scale. You're talking about speeds in terms of bandwidth, right? But speed is also super important in our industry in terms of deployment time, right? How quickly can we push out equipment out in the field? How quickly can you churn up new services? And automation is fundamental to being able to do it at the pace that we expect and we need in this industry, and particularly in the cable industry. We're keeping up. I think we're pushing the bar and continuing to use all these key technologies to keep up with that speed.
Well, and the speed, there's always this trade-off, right? Because you want to drive to the next thing, but then doing it at scale, right? The days of innovation where you could just kind of maybe try it in a few little places and then slowly ramp. Those days are gone. There's no slow ramp. As soon as you prove it out, maybe in a field trial, or back in my old days with, you developing a radically new device, you try it in maybe one part of one country to see how it works. But then right away, you're stomping on the gas pedal, you're firing up all the factories, you're going to launch in 168 countries. In the case of the cable industry, because the industry collaborates, everybody uses the same technology globally. And so as soon as someone figures out that something's working really well, then the scale just explodes.
Absolutely.
But then we're all struggling with the supply chain problems, right? So you got the scale, but you got the supply chain. And I think that's where you were talking before about the virtualization piece, because that kind of takes a little bit of the pressure off of the supply chain congestion, right?
It does. Economies of scale, leveraging other industries is super important, right? In terms of, first of all, reacting and giving new product and new capabilities, but also when you're leveraging other industries and other economies of scale, like Intel processors, right? They're tried and true, and they're being used everywhere. You could leverage that in the industry.
Mm-hmm.
So having things that are general purpose, whether they're in the cloud, private cloud, on infrastructure locally, allows us to keep up with that scale and to meet the demands, because you have enough of a supply chain infrastructure to meet the demand.
Yeah, and the old days of where everybody would do, proprietary silicon because they need that extra little oomph out of it. Moore's law is a great thing. You wait for that. Then there's that one more cycle of Moore's law, and all of a sudden you can get beyond the proprietary silicon requirement.
When we started at Harmonic doing a virtualized solution 8 years ago, let's say, the feedback we got from our engineers, or because we used custom silicon, was that you can't keep up. This is impossible. And part of innovating is about pushing and trying things that people say are impossible and making it possible.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what, collectively we did. And thankfully what we've seen is, when you get a custom built silicon, it's going to be the maximum performance the day you get it, and it's never going to get better. It's never going to get worse. But with the software that runs on these CPUs, first of all, the CPUs are getting better, this Moore's law, and we've seen that. We've dramatically increased our performance in the same rack space. So the performance per watt and the performance, percent and per dollar is just increasing, right? Number one. And then the software changes on top of those generational improvements with general purpose CPUs is phenomenal. You could ratchet up with some software algorithms and you could actually get that. So it's getting better. Right. It's not something that just stays and doesn't get any better. That's an
interesting point, because you don't think about the fact that if you do proprietary silicon, unless you're going to do your own version of Moore's law investments to refresh that custom silicon, and I think look, the cost of silicon is skyrocketing. I've got a lot of close contacts with Intel from my previous life at HP. And a lot of people think about, Moore's law is a great thing. You get the doubling of performance. The one thing a lot of people don't realize is along with the doubling of the performance is the doubling of the cost for the next generation of fab facility, right? So Intel just got support from the U.S. government for the new fab in Ohio. That's $30 billion. 30 with a B, billion for the Ohio facility. So that means that the next generation of Intel fab is going to be 60 billion. Then you're at 120 billion, right?
Yeah.
So just as performance improves, the cost to manufacture it, and it's got to be spread across a much larger marketplace, or it's not a viable, option to continue to do that. But silicon is just so critical to everything in our lives. Every car, every device, your watch, your tablet, everything depends on them. So I think it almost is bringing together a wide range of ecosystems to kind of align on some of these critical element pieces. And it's harder and harder to differentiate or innovate in the silicon space against companies that can do $30 billion fabs.
Yeah. Right? Thankfully, we're focused on software, not the
exactly.
silicon. The silicon piece that's enabling us.
Right. Well, that was my point. The point is focus on where you can add innovation value.
Exactly.
Right. Not in an area where your innovation value kind of puts you down a side alley.
That's exactly right.
Right.
That's exactly right.
And I'm trying to remember who has the quote, right? That software will eat hardware for lunch. Was it Zuckerberg or Andreessen?
Andreessen.
Was it Andreessen?
It was Andreessen, I believe.
I should know this. Mark was on the board at HP when I was there. But software is where it's at. Data is key to being able to understand what's happening in whatever innovation you're delivering. And I think I think if organizations are not thinking about applying AI to whatever they're innovating on, they're going to get left behind.
And I think it's a combination of things on top of that. When you think about subscriber experience, you want instant data near the subscriber and you want big data processing in the cloud. You want to leverage those resources where it makes most sense. So in terms of having that data available and doing something with it, we talk about 10G reliability, latency, we talk about speeds. And it's important to understand that there's the opportunity with software and general purpose processors allows us to run those applications in the right part of the network. And the fact that they run on, like Intel CPUs, for example, it allows us to transport and move that software to where it needs to be,
right.
And big data analytics will only continue to improve, whether it's storage or processing, and then giving those recommendations and automations and self-healing down to that, to what we do with the network, but also with the subscribers.
Yeah, and there's been over the decades, there's always been the attempt at the big data analytics. And I think people underestimate. Everybody says, "Well, give me every bit of data we can capture." Okay, that's a fire hose.
What are you going to do with it?
What are you going to do with it?
Yeah,
and one of the challenges that we've seen with AI projects in my organization, we've got a entire team that just is PhD scientists on the AI world, right? And one of the challenges that a lot of people don't think about is data cleansing, data quality, right? Every bit of data doesn't mean the same thing. And if it comes from different suppliers, I get a piece of data from this vendor part in the network, and I get data from this, they're not the same. And I can't just throw it together and assume that they mean the same thing. And data cleansing is something I think a lot of organizations overlook to really seriously think about the data they're capturing. And setting it up right in the beginning saves you a ton of heartache later on.
You nailed it. I mean, when we started, we sent every bit of data out there. And I have to tell you, it costs money, and then you realize, okay, I'm spending money on this data. What am I doing with it? And not every piece of data is the same in terms of the quality of what you could do with that information. Then you realize, I got to filter this down to the things that basically drive the most value. Value creation with the data is what's important. So you get the data, what can you do with it, and then how frequently do you need it? There's some pieces of data that we want on a second by second basis. There's things that we want on a daily basis, and you have to have that intelligence after basically learning all that, and then the data will continue to improve. What you do with that data is also quite important, and how frequently you take those actions is quite important. We've actually spent time adding insights into our solutions by taking the data and giving network utilization, proactive information about subscribers. And that's come with our experience of being able to pinpoint which pieces of data provide the most value, that are actionable for meaningful operations and improved experiences.
And where does that... I mean, I know you're... Harmonic has a very strong relationship of working closely with your customers.
Yeah.
And that's key, right? Because they're the ones on the front line,
That's right.
of operating these networks and operating these networks at unbelievable scale. So what's the process of using the customer side of your relationship to feed into the products and innovations that you're working on?
It has to be a collaboration. And the reason that is technology is great, but it cannot be just for technology's sake. It has to solve a problem. So when we focus on challenges, whether it's deployment scale or operation scale or reliability, we work really closely with our customers and understanding where they're spending the most amount of time and effort and where they want to take it, where their focus is on. If we're talking about DOCSIS 4.0, how do you reduce the power consumption budget while increasing the speeds? If we're talking about rolling hundreds or thousands of DAA devices out in the field, how do you do that quickly? If we're talking about pinpointing issues in the network, it could be a construction issue. It could be a commercial power outage. It could be anything. How do you pinpoint that? Or if it's something that is an insight on, you can predict a node split before your subscribers call and complain. How do you focus and get that information to tell them a week beforehand or a month beforehand? Take a look at this. You're going to prevent a bunch of subscriber calls. So you're going to get a better NPS. You're going to get a better score, from your subscribers. But you have to do that together with your customers to understand that that's the most important thing that they're looking at.
So who does that? Is there, in your case of Harmonic, is it the sales teams? Is it product managers on site with the customers? Do you send your actual hardcore engineers out to do these kinds of, how does the collaboration work?
Yeah, so first of all, we're super lucky that we've built the relationships that we're talking to the right people. So first of all, the question you asked is about who from Harmonic, but I'll say the first step is making sure you're speaking with the right people. Now, big organizations, there's a lot of people, and you have to know who the right people to talk to are. Small organizations, things are, information is really focused. And then from Harmonic's point of view, the way we're organized is we're very, I would say, we're not structured in a way that is very fixed. So we have organizations that work collaboratively together. We have something called LIFT, which is lab integration field trials. So they're kind of ahead. How do we install things? How do we prepare to install things? Who do we work with? Our engineers will tweak things when there are questions that are new, that are like new technologies. The sales teams are great at facilitating the relationships because, business challenges are also important. And then product management, making sure that the features we're building are prioritized at the right time for our customers. Because that's also a very important thing is what do you need and when? I need this in a month, I need this in a year, I need this in 2 years. So that collaboration is about making sure you have those right points of contact. And it's not always the same people, right? So every single person you mentioned is a part of Harmonic's discussions with our partners in the industry.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, it's always the challenge of innovating with it across organizations, right? Getting the customer insight back inside of an organization to the right people so they can take action on it.
If you're talking to the right people, then the conversations are very high quality and very valuable. And it goes obviously on both sides of the fence. So that's the first step.
So how would you describe Harmonic's culture around innovation? Right?
We just had our hackathon where we stopped for a couple of days, not literally, but nearly there. And we allow everybody in all the organizations to completely innovate, sit in front, for 2 days, come up with any relevant idea. It has to be implementable. It has to be innovative. And we judge and we actually give prizes for different ideas. And we've actually used some of those ideas in our product. Not that that's surprising, but it really is. It's so motivating for somebody in a sales position or a customer support issue, somebody who's touching the customer, very directly on the operation side, together with R&D, to come up with these different groups that push different ideas that nobody's thought of. So the hackathon is a great tool we use internally. Our leadership, basically, we have no fear or the risk of failure. So try something. You fail, that's great, no problem, move on. So, an organization that supports engineers and product management to push ideas in a way where, if it doesn't work, iterate, try again. So the culture is super important, and understanding that you're not going to get everything right. Nobody gets it 100% of the time right the first time.
Exactly. The fear of failure, for some reason, a lot of organizations, either the leadership has, come down on somebody because they tried something and it didn't work out. But that fear of failure is just a huge barrier in so many organizations.
That's true. And I've been in different organizations. This organization that I've been in for over 11 years is incredibly supportive of innovators, and more importantly, at every level within the organization. So you could have the most junior new employee get exposed to our GM. Like if there's a great idea, there's no barrier there. It's instant. So that culture is ingrained in Harmonic. It's pretty impressive.
So, as we wrap up today's episode, I always like to ask for, given your experience, we just talked about the innovation culture at Harmonic, what would be one piece of advice you would give to a junior engineer inside of an organization if they've got that kind of nucleus of an idea, right? We've all been there early in our career. We got the idea and we're like, what do I do first?
You got to do something. Going from 0 to 1 is the hardest thing. I didn't make that up, but, it resonates, right? If you're stuck at 0, you're not moving 1% closer to where you need to be. And that fear of failure we just talked about is the biggest thing. If you're not failing, you're not trying, you're not going to be able to innovate. So fail and then achieve. And I think that's the most important advice is do. Don't talk about it, just do it and then learn from that.
Perfect. Thanks very much for taking the time being here on the show.
Thanks for having me. It's
Great.
been great.
If you've been a regular listener to the show, you've heard me beat the drum on being willing to fail. Try and fail. Needing to move forward, and if failure happens, it's not a negative, it's an education. And now you've heard it from Asaf. Asaf shared in the discussion around that willingness, that innovation culture, and how important it is to try, move forward, or as he says, go from 0 to 1. Just 1% better, 1% more, 1% towards the goal, and then do that again, 1 more percent, and then 1 more percent. And before you know it, you will achieve the success that you are trying to reach for. So hopefully you found this discussion with Asaf interesting. We covered a wide range of topics, but I think both the innovation culture topic and the advice that he gave right at the end of the episode, those are golden nuggets. And hopefully you took notes and now thinking about what is it you're going to do first? What are you going to do first to go from 0 to 1? And with that, let's wrap up this week's episode. We've gone a little bit long. I appreciate you hanging in there. Thanks for being here this week. Time, as I keep reminding myself, our team here working on the show is the most valuable asset you can give us, and we do greatly appreciate it. We are working on new shows constantly, so stay tuned. We will have a new episode up for you next week. As we head into the end of the year, we'll be making some plans as we look at, after CES, the Consumer Electronics Show, looking towards the preparation for the kickoff for season 19. And by the way, if you are going to be at the Consumer Electronics Show the first week of January in Las Vegas, stop by. We will be there in the bus, parked right across from Central Hall, right near the Google booth outside. So come on by. You can take a look at the mobile studio and chat and catch up everything that's going on. We are looking forward to interviewing a bunch of really interesting people in Las Vegas this year, and would love just to have you stop by and say hi. And with that, let's wrap up this week's episode. We'll talk to you next week here on Killer Innovations. Bye-bye.
Podcasting nonstop since 2005, this has been the Killer Innovation Show on the Innovators Network.